You are now entering Clearview, Illinois. Some things you just can't explain and don't make sense if you try. I've lived in Clearview all my life, and it still manages to surprise me. I live out by the county line where the unincorporated land meets the township proper. Every night I look out into the deep forest. It has always been a mystery to me. I can't stand to see that casino just east of me, lighting up the night, drowning the life out of the sky, stealing the stars. One of the most insidious things civilization ever did was steal the night sky. For some, the stars are just dots of light that are pretty to look at. But for me, they are thousands of eyes of indifferent gods staring down at us, judging our mortal deeds. When I step back to look at my life, I do it with the same scrutiny the stars might, and my thoughts always tend to lead back to my grandfather. He being the man that taught me what it means to be a man. My most vivid memories of him happened in my early childhood. It started one dark and rainy night, as did all tales of mystery and horror. I was 8 at the time. I do not recall my grandfather Ernest's age, but he was always the elder to me, whose age was frozen in amber. It was a night like this, in the very house I write my story, looking out the same window I do now. I can see, clear as day, the me of yesterday gazing out, not to the lights in the sky, but those on the land. Grandpa Ernest was keeping an eye on me while my mom was out doing whatever it was she did. And I do mean watching in the metaphorical sense, because Grandpa was blind. He told me he lost his sight in an explosion, but because I was young, he never gave me the details. Despite that handicap, Grandpa Ernest was quite possibly the most capable man I knew and have known even to this day. There was hardly a thing he had never done, or at least heard about, and trust me when I say, he had a sage-like wisdom about most things. When I was young, I tended to forget that he couldn't see, because he always seemed so aware of his surroundings. The only time I ever got the impression he was different from everyone else was when he went places he didn't know. He would gently place his hand on my right shoulder. But that being said, I only had to guide him once, and after the first time, he memorized his location by heart. "Grandpa, the lights! There are lights outside!" I said to him with my knees on the couch, facing backwards to get a better look at the forest's dark depths. "Plenty of lights out there, boy," he said, back to me from the book he read in Braille. "No, they're out in the forest," I said. "Describe it to me," he asked while closing his unseeing eyes to better visualize, an affectation of something he may have done in his sighted days. It's bright, it's white. What else?" Grandpa asked with the patience only someone of his age could muster. At that age, it took me longer to get to the meat of the story, the hows, whys, and whats, but in dealing with my grandfather, it taught me how to be direct and how to cut to the point. "It's bouncing up and down and moving around. Fast or slow?" Slow." "Okay. What you think it is?" Grandpa asked. I replied. I didn't know then, at that age, I hadn't had enough life experiences to accurately describe it. But if you asked me now, I'd say it looked a lot like a lantern in the dark. "Could be someone out there. Come on, let's check it out," said Grandpa. He put down his book and gathered his walking cane. With the vigor of a man much younger, he made his way to the door, beckoning me forward. I didn't ask any questions. I hopped to like a good soldier. The light was still there in the back of the house, weaving into the forest. "Someone out here?" my grandpa said with utmost confidence. Even though I could see light from the darkness, there came no reply. "You still seeing it, boy?" "Yeah," I said. Grandpa moved to the very edge of the gate and reached out with his other senses. He heard things I flat out couldn't pretend to. "What's it doing now?" asked Grandpa. "It's just moving back into the forest." Grandpa took a strong hand and pushed me behind him. I didn't know why then, and I can't quite understand why now, but he knew that whatever it was couldn't be taken lightly. That was that for a while, filtered through the prism of a child's recollections. It felt like ages before it returned, but it did. When the light came back, I was no longer content to stay out on the edges of our perception, but managed to venture closer. Mom was away, as she was many nights, and Grandpa was there again. I was asleep in bed when the blinking of light sent those little red jolts of consciousness through my closed eyelids. I awoke to the light gently pulsating right outside my window. I wasn't scared because it was too benign for me to take that stance. I thought to myself, I don't remember what I thought. It was all so bizarre that it felt like it was just a dream. I watched it do its strobing dance with rapt attention. Inexplicably, it moved away. I followed. I wasn't sneaking around the house, but then again, in the dead of night, I always moved with gentler steps, as not to wake Mom, whether she was home or not. I ventured outside in pajamas and booties. The light, which was no bigger than a beach ball, stopped ever so slightly when I'd fallen behind, just to see if I were still following. I hesitated when I reached the boundary between my yard and the unknown darkness, though dark hardly seemed as daunting with the light on my side. It circled gleefully, reminiscent to that of a playful puppy, which turned into a game. From there, all my reservations about the horrible night melted away. I sought the light as if in a game of hide and seek. Before long, I began to lose track of my intangible friend, and then, and only then, when the light fled, did I know fear. Very soon, I abandoned all notions of finding the light, and it became a matter of finding my way back home. I yelled at the top of my lungs for my grandpa. He didn't appear, but that's not to say nothing did. From the dark there came reflective white stars of light that gazed upon me hungrily. I screamed, but the eyes regarded me with a cold, predatory indifference. My sobbing only served as marinade for a beast's food. The eyes could wait no longer and emerged from the darkness. I could see very little, because when the blackness shifted, I curled into a ball and looked away, hoping beyond hope that if I ignored the problem, it would go away. Inhuman growls echoed through my ears, and even at that age, I contemplated if it was my end. Paws bounded towards me. I heard a rustle of leaves. "Go on back where you come from," yelled my grandpa with such fury it scared me just as much as them. I heard beastly yelps and frantic footfalls. When I opened my eyes, Grandpa brandished his cane in one hand and what I could only describe as a rapier in the other. Blood flew. Glints of moonlight caught the blade, sending out streams of silver. In the dark lay what I thought was a wolf, bleeding from its guts, struggling to stand. Grandpa looked the monster's direction, seen without sight, then jabbed his sword down, putting the beast out of its misery. He flicked his blade, then humbly slipped it into his cane. He reached out to me and said, "Come on, boy." I took his hand and we began our trek home. Grandpa led me back to the house with sure steps. The dark didn't scare him one bit. After what seemed like a long time, Grandpa's footsteps became less sure. He slowed as if to ponder, and in the moonlight I could see his confusion, as if he couldn't understand why he wasn't home. Of course he didn't tell me he was alarmed, but of course I figured it out unconsciously. "Go this way, boy," said Grandpa. He placed his hand on my shoulder, indicating he transitioned into following me over the course he had plotted in his head. "Where are we going, Grandpa?" "That way about," he said, pointing ahead with his cane. The elusive light winked back into my perception.
Grandpa, the light is back,
I said gleefully, as if an old playmate returned.
Not that way, then.
But I said, not that way, boy, he repeated, clamping my shoulder a bit tighter as to prevent me from suddenly breaking away. We trudged through the forest for what felt like hours, and though Grandpa never shared his thoughts with me, I can intuit his frustration.
You still seeing that light, boy?
He asked. Yes.
All right, follow it.
You said don't follow it, Grandpa. I know what I said. Now I said follow it. Grandpa told me without raising his voice. In all the time I've known him, he never yelled at me or anyone. He possessed a measure of calm I always sought to find in my life. We followed the lantern in the darkness until it led us to a gnarled and forbidding copse of twisted trees, barring our passage the same as sin trees. When we took a step inside, Grandpa slowly interposed himself between me and whatever it was he must have perceived to be inside, because I personally couldn't tell. He now led the way, even though it was clear he didn't know where he was going. The forest came to life, and those twisting trees unfurled and pushed out something that appeared to be comprised of the living forest. It was an abstract form that would put you in the mindset of a man. Its skin was bark and moss, hair, leaves, muscles, the interconnected vines of overgrowth. The thing was centered in the throne of plant life. At first, I wasn't certain if it were real at all, until it craned what a living being would consider its head at Grandpa and me.
Grandpa,
I started to say.
I know,
he said, as if he was somehow aware. The creature stood. Twigs and vines snapped from the seat he sat. His shape was undetermined and shifted with every step. It may have been an approximation of a man, but it was no man. It was only what I could describe as the forest came alive. It pressed forward. I was unsure if it was even aware of our presence, because it had no eyes. Grandpa slowly drew his sword from his cane, and the thing stopped in its tracks. The forest bowed and inhaled, as if holding its breath.
You don't fear me,
it said, presumably to Grandpa, because I was cowering at his feet.
I live in the dark. Why you think anything would scare me?
Grandpa said.
Grandpa backed up, and I instinctively did as well.
The trees squeezed in tighter, making it clear that no one was leaving this place until their master had his say. The beast roared at us, towering 10 feet tall, sending a rhotic gust of wind in his breath. The forest behind the beast opened and revealed a glimpse of another world. It was vibrant and alive, a perfect meadow with clear streams. The creature's tendons tensed, and it reached past Grandpa for me, but Grandpa would have none of that. With a gaze I've never seen twice, he stepped to the side and sliced off the limbs that served as the creature's hands. The severed vines melted back into the earth, reclaimed by nature.
The boy is mine,
it said in a rage. Grandpa met his anger with calm and backed away. He whispered to me as if he may never get the chance again.
When I tell you to run, you don't come back for me, you heard?
I whimpered, but I didn't complain. The creature pressed forward, with all the trees tilting in to close the space. Grandpa expertly hacked at the vines that barred our way, making a hole, but only small enough that I might pass. As I looked back, I saw the wound Grandpa cut in the forest start to open. The beast attempted to pass over Grandpa and chase after me, his true target. I only saw Grandpa in flashes, hacking at the thing, holding it back. They soon both faded from my sight, and I could hear the roar of the forest creature. Maybe in triumph, maybe in frustration, I couldn't know. I roamed the dark for hours, gazing over my shoulder for Grandpa or the beast, unsure who would emerge. I had cried so much that night that I doubt that I'd have any more for the rest of my life.
I learned more about character from my grandfather in that one night than I have in all the accumulated nights I've lived until now. When dawn broke, it was as if the forest released me from its grasp, and I instantly found my way home. Grandpa died, but not that night. As I opened the back door, he said to me, "Don't you go running your ass out in the forest at night no more." And that was the most excited I've ever been to be scolded.
You are now exiting Clearview, Illinois. I hope you enjoyed the trip.